much indeed,
Lovely.
Christine.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
So now moving to the Coastal-Burwood Community Board, item 15, and Kim Money, Chair of the Board, welcome to the table to present the highlights from your report. Now, I know you've always led the way with visual presentations. This is clearly moving into a far more competitive environment than it was previously. We've had some videos this morning, so we're waiting to see whether you're keeping up.
Oh my goodness, well, bow down to David, he did a fantastic job, and so did everybody else. It's just amazing. Good morning, Andrew, and good morning, councillors and staff and community. It's great to be here, and of course I've got Deputy Chair Tim Sinters and our Board Governance Manager Joe Wells. We have no Part 8As to report today. Better get my goggles on. First up, we have just wanting to mention under the Community Board decisions under delegation. Amazing to see our young, whoopsie, wrong one. That's come later. I don't want to give them too much of a show. We're going to get number 3. Sorry, yep, 3, yep, that's the one. We've got the young ones there that was able to give some funding to, which is always exciting, and to support their endeavours, so really encouraged to see some young ones be able to help them financially there. Heading straight on to significant projects and initiatives, with the boardwalk at South New Brighton, which we were able to repair, is now, if you look at that, that's a little bit dated now because they've actually finished and completed a third of it. So once we've got to the end of it and the jetty's completed, we're really wanting to have a wee celebration once that's, both of them are completed. So that'll be really great. So watch your inbox there. And the New Brighton War Memorial area, you're probably quite aware through the media that the community, through the protection panels, the community weren't in favour of this. They didn't like the look of it. Neither did the Community Board, actually. So we're working now with the New Brighton Return Services Association to come to a resolution. We would like as a board to explore some landscaping options for that area, around that area, just to make it more inviting, liven it up. So we're going to be doing that, and we hope that these panels will actually be more temporary than they are going to be permanent. So that's what we're working towards. Also, just to highlight the QE2 Park transport with the 2 schools going on the site and the new recreational facility going in there. We're very aware about the parking issue, so as a board we're just wanting to be involved in that process right from the very beginning, because the volumes are obviously going to be increasing, and there's going to be a wide range of users, especially with, we hear there's quite a few students that drive cars these days. So moving on to the significant community issues, the one that we have to highlight today, it's been a horrific month for the South Brighton and South Shore community through the floodings that we had in that July weekend. I'd just like to take this opportunity on behalf of the board just to say thank you very much to the staff and to the contractors that were there that weekend. We, Joe, myself, David, East and Tim were in the car driving around virtually all weekend, and it was just really fantastic to see the contractors and the staff's empathy towards the community. They were very concerned, and whenever they approached any of the staff and contractors, they had as much time as they needed to assure them and to hear what they were wanting to say. So, and I just want to especially mention Tim at this stage, because if we hadn't have had him on the spot, it would have been a bigger disaster than it was. In another life, Tim's background is a commercial fisherman, so he is his life and job totally dependent on knowing tides and the currents and weather, and his local knowledge was just amazing for that weekend. So he was able to show the contractors and staff where the weak points were through that. So thank you, Tim, for that. And actually, I must just say at this point, it's Tim's birthday today, so happy birthday, Tim.
Feel just the same.
Yep, so he's rushed in this morning.
I should be up the mountains today, but I came in especially for this.
Yeah, so that's great. So, so great for that. Clarification we'd like to, on behalf of the community, we'd just like to clarify some things here. So this flooding that we had on that weekend is earthquake related flooding, and just to sort of recap on a few things, the land had dropped in certain areas, the land was mechanically lowered when removing the houses from the red zone, the retaining walls were damaged and removed, and consequently that caused the erosion from behind. And so when you had for example, the Reno mattress, which is stones in the wire mesh there, securing the higher land, and the earthquake that dropped, so therefore the water was, in some areas it dropped, and so therefore the water was able to get through, and a road behind it, and consequently we have what we have. And also Tim will talk later on the bunding there, but just that in itself was one issue, but then also the drainage is the other. So if you can imagine, I was actually going to bring a prop this morning, Andrew, so I'm letting the side down a little bit. I was trying to find one of those little birthday whistles that roll up, and I was wanting to display the sort of drainage that we have. So if you imagine one of those, please, when you're blowing into it, it works really well and everything's going fine. But if you pinched it at the end and held it there and then blew, it just wouldn't work, it wouldn't do its job. And that's what our drainage is like down at South New Brighton. We have the system in there, whereas if the flaps of this drainage system are not operating as they should, and so therefore the street water and the rainwater just can't get out. So add that to the earthquake damage, the water coming in from the estuary, plus the rainwater not being able to get out of the drainage things, we have what we have that weekend. So we are also wanting to just put in a thank you at this point too for all of you backing David Eath's notice of motion on the 3rd of August, which I at this point would like to read for the benefit of the community that haven't heard it. And that notice of motion was: seek urgent approval for resource consent to continue and complete to a robust standard the bund work created on Friday the 22nd of July to Sunday the 23rd of July, and to extend this work as necessary to prevent seawater inundation along the estuary side of South Shore and South New Brighton Domain to the jetty. So we really do appreciate you all getting in behind that one. Thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Tim at this point.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your birthday wishes too, by the way. Presents accepted later. Thank you, Kim, for introducing me there as my expertise on weather. But look, even on the paper during the week, in fact the day before on the 20th, on the Thursday, the headlines were: warning of 2 months rain in 1 day, storm approaches. South Islanders are being urged to prepare for the storm with 2 months rain, high tides, etc. So it was fairly well forecasted, and I was worried on the Monday. Friday morning, I looked at the Avon, it was low tide, it was half full. So you knew it was going to be a biggie. I requested sandbags the day before for some areas and didn't have any luck. The sad thing about this whole thing is it didn't have to happen. And I don't know how many times I've been to the council over the last 4 or 5 years saying we have got some big gaps in the stop banks. And one stop bank you don't know about is the one in South Brighton, from Caspian Street. There's a gap 200 metres long. I mean, the stop bank stops. There's a big gap and it went straight through the red zone onto Estuary Road. Now this happened 3 or 4 weeks ago too on a big tide. And I took council staff down and showed them, and contractors, and Regenerate. And it's so disappointing when you see the gaps, you know it's going to happen and nothing gets done. And I looked at all those workers on the Friday night and the Saturday working all through the night. They didn't have to be there. They worked in the most atrocious conditions to fix up a bum that we've been asking for so long to be fixed. All those guys could have been in the Heathcote looking after the people there, where it was more urgently needed. So it's, again, we've got to be proactive, not reactive. As I said, it didn't have to happen. And that, as I said, the warning's been there. We could have gone away scot-free with that. As I said, it was so obvious it was going to happen. And it was a big event. And, we only have to look at what happened around the whole east coast of the South Island. And I don't think we were ready enough. And it's quite sad that we had to actually get to the stage to get 6 years of fighting to get the work done overnight, to get fixed. But Kim was there, Dave was there. It was one of the most horriblest things to see people on the street seeing water coming into their houses. They only went into 3 houses, by the way, but people were saying this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't be happening. The fixes were so easy for South Shore, South Brighton, and that's the sad thing about it. I mean, I don't know how you do the Heathcote. I mean, if you compare us to the Heathcote, we are so simple. We're fixed now anyway, so that's good. Temporary, I must admit, but we have to learn from this. We can't keep on just fixing it beforehand. I questioned it a couple of days, or about a month beforehand actually, and I said, you know, it needs doing, and there was no money on the budget, and I did quote, you'll find money when it happens. And that's exactly what happened. And it happens in so many cases around the city. So that's my... Oh, also the camping ground too, I must admit too. The camping ground had water almost come into it. Luckily the contractors were there and managed to put a little bund in front. Well, we've just signed a 21-year lease for the camping ground for the new owners, and here they've got water coming right up to their doorstep. So again, didn't have to happen. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as Tim has said, there's things that we can learn from this. Also, we feel that going forward from here, the resolution that was passed on the 20th of June is a positive step forward, with David's notice of motion as well. So these actions that have been since actioned do give our community some assurance, so we do thank you for that. Just highlighting a few other things here, we've got under the significant matters of interest, there was, we're very grateful to the staff for investigating the 122 Pages Road. It was to be demolished, however we've asked if this is possibly able to be retained, so we're very grateful for them looking into that and seeing if there's some other options there that we can preserve this house. So here we go. We had an awesome week this week. It's nice to have some ups because we've had a few downs. We've had the 2 sod turnings this week, the Shirley Boys and Avonside Girls High School, which was really exciting on the QE2 site. Very sorry I haven't got a picture. My photography work is not quite up to some of the ones around the table like Dion's. But anyway, we've got one here that Joe, I think, took, or someone took from DCL. Oh, absolutely. I can't take any credit there. It's these young ones that were showing us up, weren't they, David? But what is... It's probably me saying, move over, David, let me in here. But anyway, it was... the 2 occasions were very exciting, and when it came to the playground, I thought, what a special way to start the regeneration of New Brighton with a children's playground. I mean, that's pretty special. And these young ones here, this is a historical day for them. You know, they'll be able to tell their grandkids about it, and that's them, and etc. etc. So they're children there from the New Brighton Catholic School and South New Brighton Primary School. So it was a wonderful day that DCL had put on, and it was there was a real poignant moment where the big digger truck turned up. So that actually happened to be in the background, and a lot of people were very excited to actually see that on site. So it was a wonderful day, and things are looking up there, and we do appreciate, because you were all part of that, so thank you. Any questions?
Okay, so there's time for probably just a couple of questions. Yanni?
Thank you. Have you had any response from staff around reporting back on the mayoral task force, or are you aware that that's something that we've asked for? In terms of the flooding, because I do think we owe you some answers around what hasn't happened and why it didn't happen.
No. I've had contact with them in previous events, but going back a few years. I didn't even know that it still existed, actually.
All right, so I mean there is clearly work going on, which you've already referred to in your presentation, and obviously there'll be some local issues that will be picked up within that work. I mean, thanks very much indeed for raising the local view of those issues, and I mean all of us were very concerned around what was going on in all of those areas where the water rose and homes were flooded and so on. But yeah, you certainly referred to the notice of motion and the debate that we've had in this chamber in the past couple of meetings. There's more reporting which will land, and obviously there's work being done in that space, and it was pleasing to hear some positive comments, along with hearing about obviously some of the challenges that we're all facing as well, as we move through those issues. But there is work underway, and it may well be, Yanni, that, you know, I mean, some of these things are definitely relative to South Shore, relative to the Heathcote, relative to other areas as well, and there is work going on. It may be that those questions are better put to the areas where those work streams have been considered, rather than to the community board, although your level of awareness of what work's going on obviously is something that's important to us.
So I was just trying, I mean, I thought that we'd asked for, I think the Mayor had asked for it, I'd also raised it in the debate, that we get a report on the actions in the mayoral task force and what hasn't happened, what has happened, and just conclude that loop. it is a level of service that we were noted for failing, which I raised in the performance reports that we were getting. So I think it is important that we do involve the community board in that, given that they've got some feedback that they may wish to.
So my understanding is that that reporting will come to the ITI committee. We've got to bear in mind, I think, that we've gone from emergency to recovery, and obviously any learnings and findings and further work will flow on from that. But yeah, my understanding is that that will come to the ITI committee for further consideration.
Okay. And just the second question was just
to add to that, Yanni, that is a work in progress, so it is happening.
Great. Is there a process by which the community board can feed into a debrief on the flooding events?
Again, when we get to the point of having that debrief, when we look at learnings, that's obviously something that will be considered at that time. I think it would be very sensible to hear from people within local communities and from the local community boards to feed into that. Absolutely. Phil?
My understanding, staff clearly are still engaged in recovery work.
Yep.
The land drainage working group work that's done there is regularly reported in the Three Waters report as part of the ITI committee agenda, and there's a record of all that there for you, Yanni, and other councillors and community board members.
Yep, great. Okay, great. So, I mean, obviously some things have been raised by the community board which are serious concerns at the local level. I think the message loud and clear is that there are work streams going on where those things are going to be picked up, but we've certainly heard the message that you've brought to us this morning very clearly.
Yeah, and staff have been great. Anytime we've wanted to access them or have meetings or anything, they've always been available, so I've appreciated that. So we understand there's going to be a report come to the table next week, so decisions are going to be made. So I want to just send out a personal invitation to all of you. Tim would be more than happy to walk you down the estuary edge so that you can be more informed about the decisions that you're going to make. So yeah, thanks very much. He does have a caravan at his place that looks out over the sea, so it's well worth a trip for a coffee. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that. That brings us to the end of the time that we've got for questions, but thanks very much indeed for the presentation of the report and the issues from your area. So we have a recommendation in front of us to receive the community board report, moved by David East, seconded by Glenn Livingstone. All of those in favour? Against? That's carried.